Good evening, you're watching OneVoice on Asia One, and I'm Kerry Alexandra. Tonight, we're continuing our look at a conflict that's playing out way beyond the devastation it's causing on the ground. A war that is also unfolding on social media and across the global economy, as it increasingly tightens its grip on the world's most critical maritime trade routes. Yesterday, Yemen's Houthis announced they would close the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, another critical trade route, if Donald Trump continues to disrupt the peace process in the region with his blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water through which nearly a fifth of the world's oil flows, has to a degree become the eye of the storm in this conflict, as the US tries to force it open and the Iranians try to keep it tightly closed to all but a few friendly vessels in recent weeks. But it's not just about access, it's about control. As tensions continue to escalate, Iran has moved to tighten its hold over the strait, reopening it and then swiftly closing it again, essentially saying no vessel can pass freely if its own economic lifelines remain blocked through strict sanctions and if its other red line demands aren't met. Meanwhile, the US continues its blockade strategy, insisting it will not be pressured into concessions. At this point in the conflict, it seems frequently to be a case of who blinks first. A question of power and who truly holds it for all the bluster on both sides. The US with the third largest military in the world after China and India, or Iran with their strategy of using cheap but lethally effective drones, fake inflatable fighter jets that cost the US a fortune to blow up just to realise they were in fact decoys, and slick social media winning hearts and minds as well as the apathy of the West. Countries who would normally follow the US into battle, who have stayed conspicuously out of this one, and at the same time, the rage of the East by targeting neighbouring countries hosting US bases, before we even start on the power Iran wields by controlling one of the world's most important waterways. Donald Trump has once again this week taken a hardline stance on the Strait of Hormuz, warning of devastating consequences if Iran doesn't comply with his demands to reopen it. Tehran, however, has responded again with calculated defiance, asserting not just its military readiness, but economic leverage over one of the world's most vital trade arteries, as the two vie for dominance in the strait and the conflict. Because control of the Strait of Hormuz is not just strategic, it's symbolic of a larger struggle. Who dictates global energy flows? Who can withstand the pressure? And who can apply it more effectively? Are we now witnessing a slow-burning shift in power where control over trade route choke points begins to challenge modern Western dominance? Are we beginning to see cracks in the US's long-standing hegemony? So tonight we're asking, is Iran turning the Strait of Hormuz into its most powerful bargaining tool? Can the United States maintain its global economic dominance under this kind of pressure? And if neither side's back down, who really pays the price? Joining us tonight, former Iranian diplomat Mehrdad Konsari and our very own James Nish, who's in Islamabad with bated breath this week, awaiting a potential second round of talks there. Thank you both for joining us tonight. So let's start here. Mr. Konsari, the Strait of Hormuz has effectively become the eye of the storm in this confrontation. Is it still primarily now a military standoff, or has it become a great game-style battle over global influence and economic control, do you think?
Well, I think in the bigger picture, both of those are important factors. But more importantly, right now, the standoff has become something of a problem in terms of facilitating the upcoming meeting that is scheduled. This has to be resolved or looked at in a way that does not hinder or potentially assist the coming together of the two delegations in order to have the planned meeting that everyone has been looking forward to in Islamabad. And how this is treated, obviously, and how this is resolved in view of all the events that have taken place in the last 24 hours, especially, is very much will very much affect the way in which the Iranians can accept to come to Islamabad and to look as though they are, on equal footing with the United States while maintaining their defiant stance and face-saving measures which they need to have. So how they do not want to go to the meeting unless they sort of can protect themselves in that sense because of their domestic rivalries that is going on in parallel to all of these things between the pragmatists and the dogmatists inside the country. So all of these factors are very much tied in to how this issue regarding this eye of the storm that you rightly mentioned progresses in the course of the next few hours or next few days.
And to both of you, but let's start with you this time, James. The US has one of the biggest, most powerful militaries in the world with global reach. But Iran sits at the heart of one of the world's most critical oil choke points. So in this moment, who actually holds more leverage, do you think?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? And I think that the answer is probably it's asymmetrical right now, although both sides will want to have you believe that they each have the upper hands. And that's very much the political posturing and the rhetoric that we're seeing from the US and from Iran. I think you're right when it comes to military strength. And we've seen that show of strength from the US with the deployment in recent weeks to the region. It is the US flexing its muscle, isn't it? But then there's the important geographical aspect, because geographically speaking, Iran has just shown us that it controls the Strait of Hormuz, that it can cause chaos, that it can cause whatever it wants in a very short period of time. And that's why I think Iran will say, well, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, we are in control.
And Mr. Konsari, what do you think?
The point is that Iran, while they can retain this stance for the time being, this is not something that they can retain on a sort of a more longer term basis. So they understand that they need to use this card in a given period of time in order to be able to get some of the things that they want as a result of discussions with the United States, understanding that neither party wants to resume the war. Neither party wants to go back to war because it's not beneficial to either of them. And obviously, were the United States to carry through the threats which President Trump made last night, that if the talks in Islamabad don't mount to anything, that they will attack Iran and destroy Iranian infrastructure and so on. They know that the consequence of that would be Iranian reprisal against the Gulf Arab states and their assets, oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, desalination plants, gas facilities in Qatar. Nobody wants that scenario. So despite the rhetoric and posturing, there is a great desire for both parties to want to get together and resolve this matter and to get over these issues. They do not want at the same time to become a slave to their own rhetoric, understanding full well the long-term consequences of that. So this is where we are right now. But additionally for Iran, which is very important, is that there is a big dispute inside the country as to which direction the country should go. Those in favor of discussions with the United States are being seriously challenged. So they have to move cautiously. They have to sound, defiant and tough in order to retain their own position in the struggle that is going on, to have power inside Iran and to be able to move Iran in a direction that is completely different if these talks are to amount to anything, to what the direction Iran was pursuing under the previous supreme leader.
And Mr. Konsari, staying with you, Iran has made it clear that if its own vessels cannot move freely, neither will others. Is this a defensive reaction to economic pressure or a deliberate strategy to assert dominance over the global energy supply?
Again, Iran knows that it can play this card for a while. But if, for example, President Trump escalates matters militarily, which would mean he has the possibility, and he has mentioned it, it's no longer a taboo thing for the United States to want to put boots on the ground. He has made that clear. Now, it's an expensive option, and he doesn't want to do it, but if Iran pushes him in a way that he has no alternative, then he will do it. And Iran is cognizant of that option. So it's a combination of all those factors that you said. But for Iran, I think the main concern is the immediate concern. The immediate concern is that the ceasefire ends on Wednesday. They need to either extend the ceasefire or to go to Islamabad and come up with some kind of a session of discussions that even if everything is not resolved at that particular meeting, that would lend an opportunity for President Trump to extend the ceasefire. These are Iran's priorities, much more than the more, you might say, big picture stuff that your question asks.
And James, Washington continues to enforce its blockade despite the risks to global markets. Is this a calculated move to maintain control or a rash reaction from Donald Trump, risking pushing the situation beyond economic strong-arming and into full-scale escalation and the ceasefire breaking down?
I think it's probably a calculated risk. And again, as the guest is pointing out, very interesting what our guest on the program is saying tonight. That is about de-escalation, that's what both parties want. Of course, the clock is ticking on that ceasefire, which is Tuesday Eastern time around 5 a.m. on Wednesday morning Pakistan time. So yes, of course, as we are saying, both sides will want to flex their muscle. Both sides will want to be seen as having the upper hand. But when it comes to the diplomacy behind the scenes, and we're seeing a lot of that, definitely in the ramping up to this second round of talks, or potential second round of talks, because of course, as of yet, nothing is confirmed. But it's vital that both sides come to the table with that ceasefire now hours away. And as the guest points out, there could be various scenarios, and it's something that we've been analysing here in Islamabad. You don't have to come to Islamabad and sign a full peace agreement. It could also be some sort of memorandum of understanding, some agreement for the way forward, for that ceasefire to be extended, because we are now in a critical phase of the next 24 hours. What happens once that ceasefire expires? Because there is, apart from the humanitarian cost, and let's leave aside for a moment the thousands who've died since the conflict began because of the situation as well between Israel and Lebanon. Domestically, the US and Iran are also damaged by this. We've seen markets react. The European markets have been reacting negatively. The price of oil is shooting up again. The US and Iran are not immune from that. And when it comes to a global situation, we're also all looking at our pockets. We're paying more for our fuel. We're going to be paying more for our food. We're going to be paying more for flights if we're traveling. So I think that everybody really does want a solution.
Now, with shipping traffic already halting, international vessels come under fire. Mr. Konsari, how close are we to a full-blown global energy crisis? And who takes the bigger hit, the United States or Iran or the rest of the world?
Well, I think if this matter is not resolved, the loser is not just the United States and Iran, but the international community. As your other guest pointed out, the cost of oil is rising, the cost of living is rising everywhere, inflation everywhere. The stock markets are taking a tumble. So the effects of this, I mean, agriculture, the lack of fertilizers, I mean, you name it, you know, the result of the continuing uncertainties and lack of resolving this particular issue just adds to everyone's problems. But obviously, if you compare Iran and the United States, Iran cannot match the military might of the United States and does not have the resources of the United States to want to engage in a sort of a long-term war of attrition, especially if the United States decides to use all the assets that is available to it. They are already threatening to potentially occupy certain Iranian territories, some islands. There is even talk that if they are to impose a situation whereby freedom of navigation in the waterway is secured, that they may even have to occupy the southern sector of the Iranian mainland, which requires putting more than 100,000, boots on the ground, which they allegedly are accumulating at this stage, although in my view, that is not a very likely scenario. But the point is that they are pointing to these things. They are pointing to this kind of eventualities. And if need be, they are able to add more boots to the numbers that are already being mentioned and to become larger than the numbers that they used when they invaded Iraq in 2003. But so Iran understands this, understands the limits to which it can push. And that is why it is trying to push hard on the one side, while behind the scenes, through back channels, diplomacy, to try and promote a situation whereby they can engage at the same time. And I think the presence of the Field Marshal Rassam in Iran and the efforts that he put during 3 days of talks with Iran is aimed at facilitating such an outcome for Iran. And this is what Iran is looking forward to. This is their salvage. This is the only way that they can salvage and survive the situation and survive. And survival for the Iranian regime is the most important thing on their agenda.
And James, given you're in Islamabad for a possible second round of talks there this week, Pakistan obviously has a relationship with both the United States and Iran, a current partner to Washington in strategic regional matters, but a neighbour to Tehran with historical, cultural and economic ties. Given the Strait of Hormuz's importance to global oil flows, how does Pakistan navigate this tightrope? Can it play a role in stabilising and de-escalating the current tensions? Looking ahead, how might Pakistan's energy needs, trade interests and regional ambitions influence its stance on these high-stake confrontations?
Various aspects to that question. First of all, there's no doubt that Pakistan is in a hugely delicate position here. It has the confidence of both the US and Iran, first of all. That's why it emerged as the mediator, as the interlocutor in these talks. And a lot has happened in the last fortnight or so. Look, let's go back 2 weeks. Many analysts were saying you're not going to get the US and Iran round the same table. And definitely, if both come to Islamabad, and there was doubt back then, they're not going to be sitting in the same room. Pakistan achieves that. It was remarkable what Pakistan has achieved. We could have been speaking today, having this been the end of the road. We had the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, say 9-10 days ago, when he left Islamabad on that Sunday morning. What is on the table is our best and final offer. Iran says no. It could have been a full stop. And yet, I think Pakistan now needs to be credited with the fact that it's allowed for the diplomatic channels, for the talks to continue behind the scenes, because we could very quickly have seen an escalation and a collapse of those talks. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, I was telling you that both US and Iran are not immune to oil prices. Well, neither is Pakistan. We've seen in Pakistan a huge rise in the cost of fuel. I think diesel has now come down, but people are paying much more. It's about 6,000 rupees extra for a full tank. That's a lot of money for people in Pakistan. So they're feeling the pinch. They also a neighbor. They're strategically positioned very near to the Strait of Hormuz. Pakistan doesn't want instability. But when it comes to these talks, I think there are two words which are of vital importance. One is the obvious one. Peace. That's what everybody wants, and that's what Pakistan's role is, to mediate and to allow both sides to speak openly and to try and reach some sort of settlement, some sort of agreement. But there's a second word which we often speak about when we're analysing the situation, and that's trust.
I think that's a good summary. James, staying with you, for decades, the United States has dominated global trade routes and energy system. Does Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz challenge that dominance? Are we seeing cracks in US hegemony?
I think we are seeing general cracks in how this moves forward. And again, we were talking earlier about both sides perhaps taking some sort of calculated risks. They will want to try and push and push. I think when it comes to negotiations, it's important for both sides to try and demonstrate that they have the upper hand. And that's very much what we're also seeing here. It's also very interesting, and I think as the guest was also pointing out, that we're seeing a lot of focus on the Strait of Hormuz. And yet, one of the main stumbling blocks, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz did emerge as a stumbling block in the talks here last weekend, but the nuclear enrichment program, that also emerged as a huge stumbling block, with the US saying that there was a lot that wasn't acceptable to them, including verification. So, are we seeing the Strait of Hormuz almost as perhaps deflecting attention from some of the other important issues? The reality is that no matter whether it is because they're taking risks, it's because they're flexing muscle, it's because they have a genuine stronghold of the area, it's causing huge global issue. The Strait of Hormuz moves about 20 to 25% of the world's oil. Millions and millions of barrels transit through the Strait of Hormuz every day. That's been affected, and that's why we're seeing the rise in oil prices. That, at the moment, is unsustainable. Going forward, there will be a shortage of oil if this doesn't resume. If the transit of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't resume, there will be a shortage, and that would be a catastrophe.
And lastly, Mr. Konsari, Iran has already demonstrated it's willing to restrict passage through the strait. How far is Tehran prepared to go in leveraging this position, even if it risks a huge global backlash?
Well, I think you have to bear in mind that Iran, 3 days ago, the Iranian foreign minister came out and said that the strait would be open to international shipping on the back of talks that, on the back of assumptions that talks are going to happen and that ceasefire had been extended to Lebanon. Now, although he was challenged internally by the hardliners who disagreed that for him having come up with such a statement, but nevertheless, it indicates a willingness on the part of the Iranian regime, the pragmatists who are interested in having dialogue with the United States and trying to resolve the outstanding issues that they have between themselves, of opening the Strait of Hormuz. Their intention is to open the Strait of Hormuz if there is some kind of an agreement with the United States that can remove sanctions and restore Iranian assets to them. The only reason why this did not happen is because the Iranians wanted the American blockade to come to an end. And you have to bear in mind that the introduction of the American blockade is maybe a week old. So if there is an agreement in Islamabad, if Iran is able to leave the meeting in a way that feels that its honor has been kept intact and has been able to move away with some of its dignity in place, then I'm sure that the issue of the strait will become far less than what it is now. There will be quibbling, but the strait will be open. The Iranians are not going to hamper any interference with international shipping while asserting that they have this right or that right, or things like that, which are going to be more talking points rather than anything that would prevent international shipping and to cause the kind of disasters that we've seen people suffer around the world at this time.
A huge thank you to both of you for joining us here this evening. A narrow strip of water with wide-reaching consequences as the United States and Iran face off over the Strait of Hormuz. It's clear this is no longer just a question of military strength, but of economic control, strategic endurance, and global influence. Because when a fifth of the world's oil is at stake, the consequences are never contained to one region. And if history has taught us anything, it's that when power and personality are tested at this level, the outcome is rarely predictable. You've been watching One Voice here on Asia One. I'm Kerry Alexandra. Thank you for joining us.